Well, we're going to play with making some skies and trying to get them to look different ways, or and so that people can choose which kind of sky they want to make for their landscape. So we're going to start with a stormy sky. And it's going to have a number of grays in it. So the first thing I'm going to do is make some neutral gray on my mixing tray. I'm taking some ultramarine blue, make a couple of different grays. Just put that over here so you can see what I'm doing. First I'm going to start with some ultramarine blue, then I'll take some cobalt blue, until I get a nice dense color of both. I think that's pretty good. Now, one of the main differences between the two colors is that the ultramarine is slightly darker, and it is also granulating. So, which means it creates a sense of texture. So I'm just going to add a little bit more in there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take some burnt sienna, and I'm going to include that, which is also granulating, but not as much as the ultramarine, I think. And I'm going to add that to the cobalt blue. Until I have take a little more cobalt and blue that up a little bit more. I think that's a good neutral for the clouds. And then over here I'm going to take some Van Dyke brown, and I'm going to mix that with the ultramarine. That will give me a little darker neutral. Okay, so I have my two colors that I'm going to use to make this stormy sky, and I'm going to use a sable brush that is, well, let's see what size it is. The size is rubbed off, so I can't even tell it's rubbed off. Anyway, it's about 3/4 of an inch. So I'll start with the lighter color, and on both of these I'm going to have some water on the side to make them lighter, as I might need to. And I'm going to just start with making a little bit of lighter cloud shape, and then a little bit of darker, and I'm going to put them almost side by side. I'm going to switch brushes to a brush that is a little bit easier for me. to do the next step of work. So I'm going to take this brush and make some more as if it's just put in a little more control over the shapes that I want to have here. And then also I'm going to create some lost edges. So I'm going to have some edges, but I'm going to have some lost edges too. And so I create some of the lost edges with water. And then there'll be an area where I might have a little more just blue. And then drop in a little bit more of the gray in there. And I'm just using a very nice canson, 140-pound paper. And these are Daniel Smith colors. So I'm going to build in a darker cloud over here. And then a little bit of lighter blue here and there of the cobalt versus the darker. So I'm mixing and changing some of these. So we have the two tones, and here and there I do a little more of one than the other, and every once in a while just slip in a little blue within the color. So it's not just a solid gray. And there are areas that are light and areas that are dark in the clouds. And some areas that are even white. And oftentimes at the bottom of the cloud there'll be this base that is fairly flat looking, and then it rises up and is puffy at the top. So do some of those bases. I have to work a bit sideways not to be covering up the camera. So I put a little blue in that one there. And I'm going to take a little bit of Payne's Gray, not mixed with anything, which is a paint that is a combination of black and blue. And I'm going to put it down at the base of this, and some over here at the base of this. Then every now and then, maybe there'll be a little bit of darker color. So that is the Payne's Gray as it comes in the tube. The things I have to do is remove this bit of pooled color there by the tape so that it doesn't run backwards into the paint. Then as we go, I'm going to leave some white there as we go down into the horizon. There'll be some further away, some clouds that will be darker. And below this base, there'll be some more. And there'll be some spaces between them. I'll use the Payne's Gray to indicate the bottom of another set of clouds. And take some of this color here. So these are the ones that are further away. And then another line of some that are further away. And here making some cloud shapes in this wet area. And there'll be some others that are further away. Yes, puppy, I know you always like to participate. So that's the first one. One can tweak them quite a lot. They basically go down close to the horizon. Just dropping in a little blue here and there to give the colors a little bit of puppies. Hey, shh. Hey, stop. Oh, they're not quite 5 months, but they're brother and sister, and they play endlessly. I'm going to soften a few edges with my paper towel. And then when it's dry, I might use my soft blending brush to just bring in a little bit of more soft edges. So this is a good first step, and we'll revisit this after it's dried. This one here has got a little bit of dilution going on, but we'll fix that. Okay, we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, well, our other one is drying, and we'll revisit that. We're going to do a mixture here of cerulean blue and cobalt blue, and it makes a very nice bright blue. The next one we're going to do is a sunny sky. So I'm just going to draw around the areas of some very bright and fluffy clouds, leaving the clouds all white. And there's some big ones and some smaller ones. I'm just using my big mop brush. That is this brush is a sable brush. It's just a big mop. Holds a lot of, the mop brushes hold a lot of water. And I'm just showing some bigger clouds, some smaller clouds. And then a little later we'll give a little bit of shape to some of those clouds with some shading. But there's no drawing, so I'm just drawing with the brush as we go along. And there are some smaller clouds as we go down, and these are clouds that are a little further away, and they're smaller. And also, as we go a little further away, the blue is a little more intense as we go further away and closer to the horizon. So I'm just showing that blue becoming a little more intense, whereas it's a little more light up here. So I would say this is basically my view of a sunny sky. And then at the beginning of that, I have to wait for it to dry a little before putting the shadows into the clouds. Otherwise they'll make quite a bit of a mess. But what I can do with my another dry brush is just maybe soften some edges. Maybe I can do it without adding water, just very damp. Because if I add some water, it's going to make a mess. And I'm just softening some edges with my very dry, slightly damp brush, but essentially very dry. I want them to be like wispy, cottony shapes, not so I'm not adding any water to this brush, but just it is picking up a small amount of paint on the edges, but not enough to have color bleed into the wash that's there. Okay. And just clean that edge so it doesn't bleed back in. And we'll let that go for a while and come back to it after some drying. Okay, we're just starting to create, I forgot to turn the camera on, some sunset sky, putting a little bit of soft yellow and gold down near the horizon. I'm not showing any land in these sky images. So I'll move the yellows away, and I'm going to take some soft reds and begin to, I've got some little bit of reds bleeding into the yellows here, and I'm just going to do a bit more with those, moving away from the horizon. And we're trying to find the right red, a little more bright red and in there, and as it moves up it's a little more violet. And the clouds are kind of, I don't know why at night, oftentimes they're just kind of stretching out. I'm going to move toward a little more magenta, a little more violet. This is a magenta. Then I'm going to have some of that kind of climbing a bit, as if there's wind there, and as if it's joining some sky that is blue, and having some blue come in there. I'll use use cerulean blue for that initially. And cobalt. And moving more into some darker blues because it's a sunset, night sky. And going up into a darker ultramarine blue until I get to a little bit of a more neutral, darker blue. So for me, this is how I would approach the colors and transition of a night sky. Moving from violets, from yellows at the horizon, up through some, and I'm going to drop in a little more movement and color here. A little more quinacridone, fuchsia and magenta here, violets. A bit darker on one side, moving into with the sun setting, and lighter over on this side. So on the right, the sun is a little more bright. I'll have a little more bright yellow on this side. And then I don't really want white spaces, so I'm going to softly, maybe I'll use my Hake brush. To do a little bit of blending there, so that the whites are not so obvious. Putting a little color in that Hake brush and pulling that over. Putting a little color here on the Hake brush and pulling it over. Making just kind of dark impression of the transition of color. And some of that darker color on the Hake brush here. Payne's gray. So that could be one version of, I don't like to put my Hake brush right in water, so I won't do that because otherwise it'll be very, very wet. This is soft. It's better, it works better if you put the Hake brush on the mixing tray. in the color rather than try to put it on the palette. It's a wonderful brush. You don't have as much control, but it does some very nice things. Here a little bit of a hair has fallen down. We don't want that. I have another blending brush. Just going to take a little bit of the gold and brighten it up over here. This is another brush, not a hockey brush, but it's called a blending brush. Again, I don't want to put this right in the water. I'm just carefully putting on in a color that is just sitting on the mixing tray. This is one approach. I'm trying to just demonstrate that there are different ways of doing things. So now I want to go back into the this neutral mixture that I made here, and I'm going to use a brush to paint some shadows under the clouds here. At the base of the clouds. In gray. And I had that neutral mixture, and now I'm putting a little bit of the Payne's Gray just being dropped in it. So that it'll blend a little bit. And then you get the feeling of cloud blending. I'll put a little bit of blue in there, here and there, lightly. And then blend it with water. Because if I can get that top cloud, that's the biggest cloud, to look like the cloud. So I'm just going to do as if there's another one here, another big cloud. And again, create some shape, and then blend it with some water, a damp brush, a tip of a damp brush, into the white, leaving quite a lot of white, because this is a sunny day, but even though it's a sunny day, the clouds still have some shadows to them. Not as much as they do on a stormy day, but they still have some. So we'll put some shadows down at some of these other clouds down here. And again, blend them. Oops. Somehow I got a little bit of violet on that brush from my towel. Okay. Oh my goodness. How did that come? It's on the side of the water dish. Not good. That's from using that very bright. Okay. Don't usually have paint being contaminated by my water dish because I wiped a brush on it. So these are very subtle. I'm going to bring in a little bit of Payne's Gray, drop it in to the light gray mixture that I made with blue and brown together. Just to create a little bit of definition at the bottom of the cloud. Doesn't have to go all the way like a line, but just here and there. See how if you drop it in at just the right moment, it spreads out a little bit. Nice. So that's how I would create the clouds for the sunny sky. And then I'll go back. This is still not quite dry here because I put too much water in there. But I'm going to do a little bit over here the same way. Just blending a little bit of gray at the base of these sunny sky clouds. Just a little bit. Not in all of them necessary, and not the dark in all of them necessarily, but a little bit of gray shadow here and there. And then a little bit of the Payne's Gray dropped in intensely at the bottom of some of these clouds. Okay. If you see me wearing a coat, my temperature runs very low, between 94 and up on the upper side, 97. Yesterday my temperature was 98.1, and I was convinced I had a terrible fever. But it's all relative, you know. For me, 98.1 really felt like a temperature. So I took it 3 different times. I wasn't sure. I thought, oh, I've got a fever, darn. I've got to worry about COVID. No, it's 98.1. So, but because I'm running a kind of low temperature in general, I'm going to put some of this very soft gray inside the whites here and there. Not too often because I don't want to lose those beautiful whites. But pretty much that's a sunny sky. Okay. I'm going to leave that the way that is. This doesn't have much in the way of clouds in it at this point. I need to think about that. It's a little bit strange, but I kind of like it. It's a little bit exciting to me. but I suppose one could think that it's very, very strange. I'm going to put some darker Payne's Gray in the corner here, and have, because I've got, this is the darker side of the and I'm going to make a little bit more kind of cloud movement coming across the sky and see how that works for me. Some kind of sideways cloud movements. With a bit of a violet. I'm removing that bit of white there because it's not quite the right thing for the sunset sky. And I'm using a magenta for this. And then I'm going to move to a more of a violet. So this is a mixture of Paroline violet together with the magenta as I go further down here and get a little darker. This is creating a sense of clouds moving across the sky in a little bit of an upward motion. And as I go down, I'm going to bring in some red and have that be a little less violet. Transition to the red. And then bring in some orange and transition to that as I move toward the sun and the yellow. So I'm not sure this is working, but it's and then I'm going to just blend more in here. And then as I move toward the, let me grab some yellow over here. Some and then it will transition toward some more blues and then up to that darker blue. And I'm just thinking of how would the color change as it goes away from the setting sun toward the deepening sky. And I'm going to just take a little more color in here. Paper is quite buckled there from being wet and drying. But yeah, to me that's the not That's how I might approach one type. There are lots of different kinds of sunsets. I'm bringing some violet here, in here. Okay, and then I'll just wipe the tape so you can see a little better. Yeah. So I tried a few different brushes in here, and lots of different colors. But basically transitioning from the settings on the yellow through a bit of an orangey red. Let's bring in a little more of that orangey red, I think might be nice. Yeah, that's better. Of course, if I was doing it in a painting, I might do it a little more carefully. But the concept would be the same. Of sun setting, clouds moving. Clouds could have been horizontal, but sometimes in a sunset, especially a sunset over the ocean where there might be a fair amount of wind, the clouds might be moving fast and moving more diagonally. But always you would get this transition from yellow through orange and red to violet to dark. So I'm just going to put a little more. So you have the kind of light, you have the light there, and then you begin to see some color, some yellow, and then it begins to transition to the reds and the violets and magentas, and eventually just the very dark night sky, which is kind of a Payne's gray, indigo, phthalo blue. Anyway, it's a combination of darks. But it's not black. It's really almost never black. It's never black. It's some dark shade of blue. I shouldn't have touched that with that wet color. It'll make a little bit of a puddle there. But anyway, you can see. I'm just going with a dry brush here so that I can pick up a little bit of that wet color. I made too much wet color there. But that's the beginning, and this is a sunny sky. This stormy sky here, I just want to do a little more detail on that. So I'll move the camera just a little more toward that, and I want to give a little more definition using the Payne's gray, a little more definition to some of these clouds, not just having them be messy. So I should give them a little bit of base and a little bit of shadows here and there, coming up into the gray. And defining some of the shapes in the clouds. You can see that? Okay. And then I take a very almost dry, damp brush and soften the edges a little bit there, as you saw me do with the sunny sky. So just soft, very subtle indications of shapes. So I'll take some of that bluish mixture that I made over there. That's a neutral, but use also the Payne's gray and mix, create that base, and make some shapes and shadows in the clouds. See how it's just beginning to emerge. So one can just keep on in this way, building up gradually the base, leaving some white spaces, using whether it's some phthalo blue, some Payne's gray, some dark mixture of ultramarine blue with browns, but building up some of the darks in here, because we already have a nice amount. I know it looked like a big messy puddle, but now you can see that it created if we just follow the messy puddle and say, oh, here are some nice shapes that I'm seeing, I'm going to just accentuate the shapes that the watercolor has already made for me. So this is, in watercolor, we always let the paint participate to some extent, and don't try to overwork controlling it. So the paint has made some interesting cloud shapes, and now we're just building on them with some blues and neutrals and Payne's gray, and making some shadows. And that's all this is making. We have a lot of middle values in here, so now we're just adding some of the darker values to build up the shadows so that they make some sense here. So I'm just going along the base of these marks that are already here. Same up here. This was a little messy up here, but the principle's the same. And in some places, we can even put in a little bit of violet, tiny bit of cobalt violet or magenta to just differentiate some of these clouds one from another. See what I mean? A little bit of violet here and there, maybe a little bit of violet in here would be nice. And a little bit of violet in here would be nice. Soften this edge here on the top of that cloud. And we'll just make a little bit of mark to very slight edge here and there to show that particular cloud. But the violet makes it just a bit different, enough so that, here I'll put a little bit of magenta here. Again, to just distinguish that cloud a little bit. I can put some down here. I can put some in here now and then. Because there's always some violet in the shadows. And we can put some up here as an edge in this cloud that's below. And put some dark in there to make that cloud a little bit darker behind this one here. So this is just I'm not looking at a photo or trying to copy something, but just trying to indicate the approach. And bring a little bit of blue in here. It seems like there's some light there, so I'll make a little bit of blue around that light. Realize some light is peeping through somehow. And this cloud is a bit light, so we'll keep that. And just blend this other one in. Just put some shadows in here, very modest here and there. I'm going to soften this one. Put in a little bit of violet here. Soften this one too. I think that's enough for now. It just gives you an idea of how to approach the storm clouds. They're generally moving along pretty well at a clip. So, and they're piled up together, and so. And I'm just going to darken the sky a little bit up here to make it a little more stormy up there. And dropping in some dark just to make it a little more stormy and a sense of more threatening color up there. And oftentimes you'll have it be a little more dark and threatening on one side of the sky than the other. So I'll just leave that there on that side and leave the other side a little more blue. Building that up still, right there. There. So there we have the beginning of Stormy Sky, Sunny Sky, Sunset. I think that's enough for tonight. I have to think about what we might be able to put in this one final space, but for now, it's okay. Okay, let's do one more and fill this space. We won't need much in the way of blues. I'm going to do a sunrise. Morning sun. Very little blue. I'm just going to take a little bit of blue. I'll use a light cobalt blue. I should have cleaner water. That's not too bad. So I'm going to put some water here and water here and a little bit of water here, and let some blue drop down into that water, and then I will blend it in. Because there's not going to be much in the way of blue in this early morning sky. It's going to start off with mostly pinks and yellows. Okay, so I'm going to take my brush and just soften those edges, and it's going to blend in. Very subtly. And then the next color, take that away. I think the next color that would be good to use would be an opera pink. And it would be at the edges. I'll soften my brush a little so it's not so bright, but it will be at the edges of this blue. And then it will also move down, and I'll soften the edges there. I'm drying my brush a bit just to soften those edges with just a damp brush, not I've got a little more pink in here. Okay, a little bit soft, very subtle. Then I want to take some bit of not quite an orange, a little bit of fire ochre or transparent red oxide, mixing with a yellow, and I'm going to build in a kind of soft orange, not too bright, a bit subtle. As if it's at the base of clouds, but instead of using gray to make the base of the clouds, I'm using this more golden and reddish color to make the base of clouds. I'm going to make it very watery, and these are going to be clouds that are very subtle, not very bright. Now I have to stop there and develop a yellow color now for the rest of my mix, and that yellow color should be let's see, I may have to mix it to get the right color. That's too orangey, should be more lemony. So I'll go with a little bit of lemon. Still too orangey, I have to go with more lemon. And I'll use some Cerulean. See if I can get it a little more lemony. Still more lemony with more Cerulean. Yeah, I think that's just about right. Now, because it's the sun rising, it will be white in areas, and there won't be any color. So I'm just going to put color around the white and move it up into the sky a bit. See? Because this sky doesn't have much in the way of clouds. Often when we see a very beautiful sunrise, there's not a lot of clouds, there's just a few. Okay, now I'm going to take that color and bring in some of that fire ochre, some of that transparent red. These are a little bit brownish, a little bit on the brown side. And I'm just going to bring in some clouds, indications of clouds. And let them blend and mix a little bit more. It's a little too wet, but a little bit more. And let them mix a little bit with the yellow and the pink. A little bit more blending up here. Another cloud. Creating some cloud shapes, but they're not that obvious. They're a little bit subtle. And up here it mixes a little bit. It's a little darker as it moves into the blue. What I'm doing is actually pulling some light in there. This will now dry. It'll dry lighter, but there's a sense of sunburst. Some color over here. I don't want it empty over there. And I want a little more blue over here. And a little more blue over here as well. Let me see if I can get this brush to do some blending. It's a little bit damp from before, but let's see if we can get it to do a little bit. This is called a blending brush. not quite as dry as I'd like it, but still, it still has some of the color from before on it. But just to give you an idea of creating see if we can get some of that blue a little bit better. Use my flat, try to get a little bit better sense of the blue coming. And I should wait for it to dry to put some clouds there. But I'll put a little bit anyway, since we're in the middle of this. Because if you just have light and you don't give it some sense of hitting something, so you need a little, have some shapes in there that help to define the light. I'll take a little more yellow. Show a little more yellow coming in. But with some white, soften that edge. All right, I think we're beginning to get a sense of a, I'll just take a little more blue. Tone that down, I'll get some cobalt blue instead of the more bright greenish cerulean, and I'll get a little bit of that coming in. And then I'm just going to wipe the paint that's on the tape. Then you'll have a better idea of how that looks. So there, morning sky. Of course, all of these, you take a little more time and you plan it carefully and you study a good photograph. One of them you can do a little better. But this at least is, ooh, I dropped water there. Ooh, let's see if I can pick it up without. Okay, good, not too bad. There's still a big drop there too. Okay, not too bad. I think that, oh, there's one there too. I really dropped some water down there. That one lifted color. But oh well, it is what it is. Not something that can be readily fixed. Let me see. Take my magenta and a bit of a dry brush. And there we have it. I'll blend that in a little bit. And a little bit of violet. A little bit of dry brush. Darn it. I know we had the violet here, which was very, very dark. Let's see what happens when you put your water dish and drop water on top of your painting. It doesn't happen with all paper, but this Canson paper has very good lifting ability. So you can lift mistakes out of it very easily, which is nice. But sometimes things lift out of it and you don't really want that to be happening, like just now. Okay, that's not bad. It was a combination of taking the Paraline violet and the quinacridone magenta and building some more color in there again. My soft brush here. This brush is Winsor Newton. And I think it's like a goat hair or something, this one. This one is, it doesn't look, it's not a, or a combination one. But it's working well for this. Just blending that mistake back in, so it's not too inappropriate. Okay, good enough for now. Okay, the sunrise is coming along nicely with a little bit of dry brush blue coming down and a little bit of light cloud shapes showing. So this little piece of work is done. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.